In this video, we will share with you our fall baking day, and all the recipes will be in the description box. Welcome to Family Homesteading of West Texas. We are a homeschooling homesteading family of 9. We grow, cook, and preserve most of our food from scratch. On this Friday morning, I leave a little sourdough starter in the jar and I feed it throughout the day, since I will need a full jar of active starter by this evening. Good day, friends. Welcome back. I am sitting out here by the animals under the carport where I milk. I'm just enjoying the last days before it starts getting windy. It is October, and that means it's fall. I can hardly believe it. Summer is over, although I've been waiting for it. There's not really a difference. Trees and grass have been dry all summer. It's been so hot and dry that you can't really tell the difference. But peanut harvest season is here, so we know it's fall. We have lots of pumpkins and different kind of squash that are ready in the garden. That's another sign that fall is here. Fall is also my favorite season of the year. The reason for that is because it is starting to get nice. It's not as hot anymore, but it's not so windy just yet. We know that the windy days will come, but as of right now, it's not as windy every day. When it's nice in spring, when the temperature is nice, it's usually pretty windy, so that's why I prefer fall over spring. So it's Friday afternoon, and the children and I have decided that we were going to do some baking tomorrow. We were going to do some fall baking. I wouldn't usually plan to do any baking on Saturday because I like to be kind of loose and free on a Saturday, because that's the day when my husband and our son are usually not tied up in work all day. Sometimes they would have Saturdays off, and I just like to be kind of free and available to spend the time with them. But since it is harvest season, I know that they will most likely be out on the field. The children and I decided, since they weren't doing lessons on Saturday, we were going to do some fall baking. We have lots of pumpkins in the garden that we could use up for that. And since we will be doing a lot of sourdough baking, maybe all of the baking will be sourdough, we need to be prepared and start ahead of time. We will start by getting all the batter and doughs ready this afternoon, and then we will put it in the fridge overnight and bake it in the morning. So let's check out what we have in the garden that will help us in our baking. Oh, that's a big one. I almost want to leave this one and let it turn yellow for seeds. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to leave it. I'm excited for these cayenne peppers. I've never grown cayenne pepper before. Okay, these are called, the seed packet said butterbush, but I think this is like a butternut squash. Let's see what kind of recipe we will find for these. Now this looks more like fall here. We see all these different fall colors. I should have worn gloves for these. They're pretty prickly. Now this is a bunch of squash and pumpkins. We will never eat them all, and my intention wasn't when I planted this patch here, but I know that the chickens and pigs also like them. It's also good for them, so whatever we don't eat will go to the pigs and chickens. Let's go back to the house. We'll see what we will decide to bake. We have to decide on recipes yet. We ended up picking some melons as well, so we have a full wagon. Now this is a lot of pumpkins and squash. I know for a fact that we will not even eat half of these. But you know what's hard? It's hard to choose which one or two I will pick to bake them and make pumpkin puree. I'm washing the pumpkins and then I'll make some puree. I know whatever we're gonna bake, we will need pumpkin puree for sure. All these recipes will be sourdough and we will be using freshly milled flour. We're using different wheat berries for different recipes and I'll point that out throughout the video. After washing the pumpkin, I'm drying them and I'm just poking a couple of holes on the top of the pumpkin so that the steam can come out. And then I'll be putting them in the oven and let them bake for a while. The recipes we have decided on what we're gonna bake is pumpkin pie, pumpkin cream cheese muffins. We're also gonna do chocolate zucchini cake and muffins using the same batter. And we're gonna do butternut squash rolls. So for the chocolate zucchini cake and muffins, I'm washing the zucchini, cutting off the ends, and then I'll be shredding them up. We have had so many zucchinis, this is just a good way to use them up. This will need to drain for a couple of hours. I'm also at the same time getting ready the butternut squash, and I will not be baking the butternut squash. I'm trying something else this time. So I'll wash them, I'll peel the hard peel off. While I'm getting ready all the squash, my daughter is starting with the pie crust though, and she is very good at it. She didn't manage it all by herself. I wanted to let you know that if you're making these recipes, all of them will be in the description box, but feel free to put more or less flour in your doughs because it does sometimes need to adjust a little bit. Just get a feel for it. So she's wrapping the pie crust dough in a plastic wrap and it will go into the fridge overnight. And on the butternut squash, I'm cutting them in half, taking out the seeds, and then I'll be cutting them into chunks. We're adding a little bit of butter, we're sprinkling it with a little bit of salt, put it on medium heat, and then we will simmer this for some time. We'll put the lid on and let them soften. In the meantime, the pumpkins are done. I was testing them with a fork. If they feel soft, when you put a fork in there, they are done. So I'm just using my hands and a knife to pull away all the peel. It's still a little bit hot, but I still want them warm to mash them up. And the butternut squash are done. The liquid has evaporated and it is ready to be mashed up as well. So after peeling the pumpkins, I'm cutting them into slices. I'm taking out the seeds and then it'll go into the blender and then the puree will be done. Later on I'll be adding some other stuff to the puree yet. I kept the puree of the different pumpkins separate and it's quite a different. The color is a little bit different of the pumpkins, but what blew my mind is the butternut squash. How much creamier the butternut squash looked compared to the pumpkin. And this is the butternut squash. You can even see it in the video how much creamier it is. So here we're milling soft white wheat berries for the pumpkin cream cheese muffins. So I'm always going for soft white wheat berries when I'm doing cake, muffins, or anything pastry. Then I would go for the soft white wheat berries. I'm mixing in all the dry ingredients and then give them a good mix. After I'm done with all the dry ingredients, I'm starting to add the wet ingredients. So after I've mixed all the other ingredients, I'm adding my sourdough starter, which is by now very active and bubbly. And again, the recipe will be in the description box. And another good stir, and it's ready for the fridge. And now I will mix up the zucchini chocolate cake, and I'm also gonna make some muffins out of that same batter. So I am doubling the recipe. I want to make sure I have enough to make actually a pan cheat cake and some muffins. And we'll add our sourdough starter to this one, and then that one is also ready for the fridge overnight. So I am getting started with the butternut squash roll dough. And this is a dough, it takes quite a bit of time, quite a bit of effort. You have to go back to it quite a few times to add more flour and to stretch it. And I am adding all my sourdough starter since I will be done with baking after this. I don't want anything left. And again here, I am just estimating the flour I'm putting in. And once you get familiar with baking, you kind of get the feel for it, how much flour needs to be added. But I do add it gradually over time, and I let it sit for an hour in between, and then I go back to it. And that's a very nice way to start a fermenting process too. So after about an hour or so, I'm adding the butter to the dough, and it's a room temperature butter. I'm just kneading it in, and then I'll let it ferment for about another hour or so, and then I'll start adding more and more flour. And for this dough, I used only hard white wheat berries. Good morning. It is a new day. It is Saturday morning. We did 2 of the batters yesterday. We also did the pie crust, and we put it in the fridge overnight. I ended up not doing the roll dough that I was going to do actually last night. So I did it this morning. I let the kids sleep in a little bit, and while they were still sleeping, I was preparing the roll dough. So that is all started. We will get started with the muffins and the cake now, and then we'll get to the pie and the rolls a little bit later. I'm preparing the cream cheese for the pumpkin muffins. The recipes will all be linked in the description box. Anytime you see in a recipe that it calls for sugar, I am always using the sugar in the raw. That is a non-processed sugar, so I'm always using that one in all my recipes. So we're filling up the pumpkin cream cheese muffins. We put it in the liners, and then afterwards we'll put the cream cheese, that mixture I just got ready, put it on top, and it'll be ready to bake. So my daughter thought it was probably a good idea to get 1 scoop of the batter mix, and then the cream cheese mixture, and then another scoop of the batter mix, and it turned out pretty good both ways. The chocolate zucchini cake is a very thin batter, so that's very messy, but it's still so good, it's so worth it. So I'm filling up 24 muffin tins, and then I'm also doing a pan cheat cake, and I'm just adding the last little bit of chocolate chips that I had left and mix it into the dough, and we'll get a nice chocolatey cake. So now I'm getting ready for the pumpkin pies. I'm just warming up the puree, and I'll add the other ingredients. So I will get started with the pumpkin pie crust. This dough has been in the fridge overnight. It's a sourdough dough. It's been fermenting overnight in the fridge. And I use gluten flour for this. All-purpose, organic, non-bleach I think it is. And there's 2 things that I can think of right now that I do not use freshly milled flour for. That is to flour the surface of a table to roll out a dough, and to make pasta for a Mennonite chicken noodle soup. I just don't like the grit the noodles get when we mill our own flour to make the noodles. So for those two things, we still buy our flour. One day we might be able to make it so that's not as gritty, and then we would probably still make our own flour for that as well. And for this pie dough, I used kamut and hard white wheat berries. The leftover pumpkin puree I put in this mold, and then I'll put the lid on it and save it in the freezer for another day when I want to make another pumpkin pie. And let's get to the rolls. This dough is so spongy, it is so bubbly, and it is so stretchy. I'm so confident that this will turn out very good. And we're using a thread to cut off the rolls. This dough is pretty soft, so it is much easier with a thread. With a knife, it'll just kind of slide back and forth. I'll take this thick cream off. We're going to use that to make some frosting for the cupcakes and the cake. And we'll use that more like half and half cream to make us a drink. I'm going to call this a latte, a pumpkin latte. I kept enough of the pumpkin puree out of the freezer that we could just have a drink, and the rest is in the freezer for another time. So that's basically the thickest of the cream, and then we have some that's more like half and half, and that's good for the drink. So I'm mixing up a cream cheese frosting, which we will use on the cakes and muffins. Just a quick tip here, if you're buying pumpkin spice, have you ever thought about looking on the back for the ingredients? I did, and I was shocked because all the ingredients were ingredients that I already have at home. So I make my own. I mix my own pumpkin spice, and it's just so easy. I think it's like 3 or 4 ingredients. So for the last bit of frosting, we added some cocoa powder, and then we had chocolate frosting for the last bit of the cupcakes. And then for the butternut squash rolls, I made a glaze made of cream and some different ingredients. I'll also put that recipe in the description box. And I was just using this gravy pitcher, whatever it is, to kind of sprinkle it on there. And with that, our baking day comes to an end. We had a successful day. I hope you have enjoyed it, and we'll see you next time. Bye.